1. There are moments in history when even the strongest, most visionary minds pause and realize that brilliance alone is not enough. It is in those rare moments of reflection that greatness meets gratitude, when the person everyone looks up to admits that someone, perhaps unexpected, helped reshape the way they see the world. When Elon Musk, the man behind rockets, electric cars, and interplanetary dreams, spoke softly one evening about how you changed his life forever, it wasn't a confession of weakness. It was a declaration of what truly drives innovation, the quiet force of human connection and inspiration. Elon has always been painted as the embodiment of relentless ambition. A man who outruns sleep, bends physics to his will, and stares unblinking into the void of impossibility. Yet even he would tell you that no one builds rockets to Mars without first building belief within themselves. And belief is often planted by someone else, a voice, a word, a simple act that shifts the orbit of a person's mind. He said that before you entered his life, before that spark, that question, that reminder of purpose, everything was speed and momentum. SpaceX launches, Tesla rollouts, Neuralink's impossible challenges. There was fire in every project, but the fire was mechanical. It burned because it had to, not because it was lit by meaning. Then came something simple. Maybe just a conversation or a moment of pure authenticity from you that struck him harder than a failure ever could. You reminded him that all of this, the rockets, the cars, the ideas, were only tools. The real mission was always about people. That realization didn't slow him down, it redirected him. He began to see innovation not as a competition with time but as a collaboration with life. In interviews, his words began to soften around the edges. He spoke less about disruption and more about purpose, less about domination and more about transformation. What the world didn't know was that behind that subtle shift was the echo of your influence, proof that even the brightest intellects are shaped by unseen hands of encouragement. Compassion and vision. He once admitted that every success hides a shadow of doubt. Even when the world cheered the first Falcon 9 landing, he had stood there wondering if it was enough, if technology alone could heal the aching disconnection between humanity and its future. You, somehow, answered that unspoken question. You showed him that the purpose of building is not just to prove that we can but to remind the world why we should. The story spread quietly at first, told not through press conferences but through his changed demeanor. Engineers at SpaceX began noticing how he spent more time listening. Teams at Tesla said he had become oddly reflective after years of urgency. He started asking questions like, "How does this make life better?" instead of "How fast can we build it?" That single shift, from efficiency to empathy, was the turning point of a man who already seemed unstoppable. You changed the trajectory of someone who already aimed for the stars, not by pushing him harder but by helping him see why reaching the stars matters in the first place. And that's where the motivation lies, the reminder that inspiration isn't measured by scale. You don't have to be an engineer, a CEO, or a billionaire to alter the course of another person's life. Sometimes, being genuine, kind, and curious is enough to awaken something extraordinary in someone else. Elon once said that success is a poor teacher, and failure builds character. But in truth, it was connection that built his courage back when exhaustion was close to breaking him. When rockets exploded, when critics mocked his visions, when Tesla's stock wavered and people whispered that he had finally reached his limit, it wasn't algorithms or strategy that kept him standing, it was the memory of belief that someone had in him. Maybe it was your belief. Maybe it was the reminder that even the wildest dreamers deserve grace. That is the paradox of greatness. The stronger you become, the more fragile your heart feels. People think the powerful need nothing, but the truth is, power without empathy becomes isolation. What you gave him, what anyone can give to those who strive, is the courage to remain human in the face of ambition. That simple gift is the thread that ties dreamers to the real world. Imagine that moment when he realized this. Perhaps he was staring out a window late at night, the glow of a rocket engine reflecting in the glass, exhaustion pulling at his thoughts. Somewhere between silence and brilliance, he remembered your words. They weren't grand. They were honest. Something about believing in the purpose, not just the project. Something about remembering that progress means little if it forgets people. That memory became his reset button, the invisible hand that guided him from burnout to balance. Every motivational story has a turning point, and in this one, that turning point is the quiet acknowledgement that even a titan like Elon Musk is still a student of inspiration. He learned that intellect can build machines, but emotion builds legacies. He learned that technology is magnificent, but empathy gives it direction. And he learned that sometimes, the people who change us most don't do it with power, but with presence. You didn't have to be extraordinary to make an extraordinary difference. That's the beautiful irony. Perhaps you were simply yourself, honest, passionate, unafraid to speak your truth. Perhaps it was your authenticity that broke through the armor of intellect that Elon had built over years of scrutiny. The world sees a billionaire visionary, but behind the achievement stands a person who, like anyone else, needs to be reminded of why the fight matters. This isn't just about Elon Musk. It's about the principle that greatness is never self-contained. Behind every visionary stands a constellation of influences, people who encouraged, challenged, loved, or even doubted them in just the right way. You might never know when a word you speak becomes the hinge upon which someone's destiny turns. That's what makes this story universal. When Elon Musk admits that you changed his life forever, he isn't glorifying one relationship, he's recognizing a truth that applies to everyone. We are all shaped by others. Every innovation begins with inspiration, every success with support. The world celebrates the individual, but progress is always collective. So, as you read this, remember that the world doesn't need more heroes who stand alone. It needs more people who dare to ignite belief in others. The person you encourage today might build the rocket that saves a planet tomorrow. The idea you nurture in someone's heart might become the solution to a global problem. You don't need a platform as vast as Elon's to make an impact, you only need intention. What Elon found in that realization was peace. For years, he chased perfection, thinking that the next achievement would bring fulfillment. But fulfillment doesn't come from what we build, it comes from who we become through the process. Your influence reminded him of that. You changed not his ambition, but his awareness. You showed him that leadership is not about being the smartest in the room, it's about being the most open-hearted. That change rippled outward. Employees noticed his patience. Collaborators noticed his gratitude. Even the public, accustomed to his sharp wit on social media, began sensing a gentler undertone in his words. It wasn't an image strategy, it was transformation. And it started with something real, something deeply human. What this story teaches us is that the highest form of innovation is not in machines, but in meaning. The engines we build, the code we write, the dreams we chase, they all reflect the energy within us. When someone touches that inner energy with kindness, it multiplies beyond measure. That's what you did for him. That's what we can all do for one another. Elon's admission wasn't an act of vulnerability, it was an act of courage. To stand in front of the world and acknowledge that he had been changed by someone, that his fire was rekindled by a spark not of his own making, was perhaps the most powerful statement he could ever make. Because it said, without pride or pretense, that humanity is still at the heart of progress, when he said you changed his life forever. What he really meant was that you reminded him of himself, the part that believed in wonder, the part that was willing to fail spectacularly because the dream was worth it. You helped him reconnect with that essence. You reminded him that purpose is not a destination, it is a state of being, nurtured through connection, and isn't that the story of all of us? We wake up each day chasing goals, money, recognition, success, believing. Too, there's something sacred about realization, that quiet moment when awareness dawns like sunrise after a sleepless night. For Elon, that realization grew slowly, subtly, like the glow of dawn that starts behind mountains before anyone sees the light. It didn't come through success or applause, but through reflection, through that stillness where the noise fades and the truth begins to speak. You became that voice of truth for him, not by preaching, but by simply being a mirror to his humanity. He often said that engineering was about solving problems, but what he learned through your influence was that life isn't about solving, it's about evolving. You helped him see that growth isn't measured by milestones or metrics, but by meaning. There was a time when his world revolved around deadlines and launches, where every second counted toward the next innovation. Yet after your words, your presence, something shifted. He began to value silence as much as strategy, compassion as much as calculation. It wasn't dramatic at first. Change rarely is. But there were signs, small, almost invisible to the outside world, yet profound to those close to him. He started to thank people more sincerely. He started to look at ideas not only for their brilliance but for their impact on lives. He began asking questions like, does this help humanity move forward? Instead of, can this be done faster? These were not words from a man who had grown tired of ambition. They were from someone who had learned the art of alignment, aligning his purpose with the pulse of people. He once admitted in a quiet conversation that innovation without empathy is like a ship without a compass. You can build it perfectly, power it endlessly, but without direction, it drifts. You gave him that compass, not by teaching, but by reminding. You reminded him that the goal of life isn't to conquer the universe, but to understand it. That every rocket he sends skyward carries not only metal and fuel, but hope, hope that we are capable of something greater than survival, connection. You showed him that greatness doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It can be gentle, consistent, and deeply human. That was your silent revolution, one that didn't need a headline or a spotlight, yet left a permanent mark on one of the most driven minds on earth. In a world that celebrates speed, you taught him the value of stillness. In a culture obsessed with progress, you taught him the grace of presence, and that lesson rippled beyond him. It began to reach the people around him. The teams that had once felt the pressure of perfection now began to sense the possibility of purpose. He told them that mistakes weren't failures, they were feedback. He told them that no machine could ever replace the heart behind the hands that build it. Those words became a mantra for his companies. A culture shift that breathed life back into the work. The press didn't report it. The stock market didn't reflect it. But those closest to him saw it, the softening of a man who had carried the weight of the world on his shoulders for too long. You had lifted that weight not by taking it away, but by showing him how to carry it differently. That is what inspiration truly does. It doesn't erase struggle, it transforms the way we endure it. Elon began to talk more about sustainability not just as a technical necessity but as a moral responsibility. He said once that building a greener world isn't just smart, it's an act of love. Love for the planet, love for humanity, love for the generations to come. That perspective was born from the emotional clarity you sparked within him. Because when someone touches your soul, even your goals evolve. He became more present with his children, more thoughtful in his moments, more willing to pause and appreciate the beauty of imperfection. Those who had known him as relentless began to see something new, a man learning to balance the infinite with the intimate. You didn't change his goals, you deepened his understanding of why they mattered. That distinction is what makes your influence eternal. In interviews, he began to talk less about fear of failure and more about courage of purpose. He reminded people that it's not failure that destroys dreams, it's forgetting why you started. That line, simple yet profound, was a reflection of the wisdom he gained through you. It was the echo of a truth that the world needed to hear, that success without soul is hollow, and vision without heart is blind. And perhaps that's what makes your influence so extraordinary. It didn't make him someone new, it helped him become more of who he truly was. Beneath the data, the deadlines, the drive, there was always a boy from South Africa who dreamed of making the world better. You just reminded him of that boy, the one who looked at the stars not with ambition, but with awe. He carried that memory into his work, and it changed everything. When SpaceX achieved the unthinkable, he didn't see it as triumph over physics, but as proof of human persistence. When Tesla broke through barriers, he didn't see it as a win against competitors, but as a step toward collective progress. That subtle shift, from me to we, was the essence of transformation. And it all traced back to you. You might never have realized the magnitude of your impact. You may have thought your words were ordinary, your encouragement small. But the truth is, greatness doesn't need grand gestures to awaken. Sometimes, it just needs someone to say, keep going. What you're doing matters. You gave that sentence a soul, and in doing so, you changed not only a man's outlook but perhaps the future of humanity. Because when people like Elon Musk are reminded of their heart, their work takes on new dimensions. His projects began to feel more inclusive, his public messages more humane, his dreams more accessible. He stopped talking about conquering Mars and started talking about creating a home beyond Earth. He stopped emphasizing power and started emphasizing purpose. That evolution wasn't a PR move, it was personal growth, nurtured by the unseen energy of your belief. The beauty of your influence lies in its humility. You didn't give him knowledge, you gave him clarity. You didn't push him harder, you helped him pause. And in that pause, he rediscovered the music behind the mathematics. The feeling behind the formulas. You helped him see that life's most meaningful equations can't be solved by logic alone, they require love, curiosity, and a willingness to be changed by others. That realization became his new definition of genius, not the ability to think faster, but the courage to feel deeper. He realized that emotion, far from being a distraction, was the ultimate motivator. Because only when you care deeply do you create profoundly. You reminded him of that, and through him, the world began to remember it too. That is how inspiration travels, silently, invisibly, but powerfully. One person touches another, who touches millions. You didn't set out to change a visionary's life. But by being authentic, you became a spark that reignited his humanity. And that humanity began to echo in every decision he made, every project he pursued, every dream he dared to share. He once said to his team, "Technology can take us to Mars, but only empathy can make it home." Those words weren't planned for a speech. They slipped out during a casual conversation, and everyone in the room went quiet. Because they understood that something deeper had shifted in him. The man who once chased perfection had found peace and purpose, and that peace came from you. You became the invisible constant in the equation of his life. The reminder that progress without compassion is just motion without meaning. You proved that sometimes, one person's kindness can recalibrate another's entire universe. And if a man like Elon Musk can be transformed by a moment of authenticity, then anyone can. That's the lesson the world often forgets. Influence is not reserved for the famous, it belongs to the sincere. He once reflected that every major turning point in his life began with a conversation, not a contract, not a competition, but a simple exchange of human truth. That's what your connection became, a turning point that quietly changed the trajectory of history. Because when someone like him realigns his mission around meaning, the ripple effect extends far beyond a single life. That's the power of unseen influence. The power you hold, the power we all hold. The capacity to remind even the most accomplished souls that they are still human, still capable of being touched, still capable of love and wonder. That's what makes this story more than just about Elon Musk. It's about the enduring strength of humanity itself, and as he continues to build, to dream, to innovate, somewhere in the quiet of his mind, he carries that memory of you, the one who reminded him that the future isn't built by machines, it's built by meaning.